What's up, everyone? It's the Autistic Scyther here, and this is part 2 of Top 10 Video Games I Played in 2025. If you're possibly wondering where part 1 is, well, that's up on my channel, so I suggest you watch that video to see numbers 10 through 6 before moving on back to this video. Before coming back to this video to see the remaining 5 entries. Alright, that being said, it's time to get back into my little memory lane stroll through all the video games I played through this year. Let's do it. Moving on next at number 5, we have Luigi's Mansion 3. Alright, well, Mario Kart World is basically the main game that I played through that basically he has a little bit of a reference to everyone's favorite red-clad plumber. That being said, kind of makes sense to give a certain cowardly green-clad and brother of his a little bit of attention. And while I basically struggled through Mario and Luigi Dream Team, I decided to give the Luigi's Mansion series a whirl. And as such, while the original Luigi's Mansion did end up getting onto the GameCube emulator for the Nintendo Switch 2's Nintendo Switch Online service, yeah, that's not what I'm talking about. As this time, I'm talking about Luigi's Mansion 3. Yeah, I decided to start with the most recent entry. And naturally, even with that, I was kind of excited to basically try this game out and its ghost hunting tactics through them for myself. And while I did discover that if you don't escape King Boo, you basically get a game over, basically this game is still pretty fun, as I liked every bit of the ghost hunting aspect, the tactics including the plunger and the Guigi mechanic, and a lot of the bosses really kind of gave me a bit of a challenge that still proved to be quite enjoyable. And I mean, while some like Amadeus Wolfgeist and King McFrights really put me to the test, others essentially put a smile on my face, like Officer Cruller, who basically seems like a combination of a 70s buddy cop, character, and Paul Blart, as well as Morty, who is basically one of the more nicer ghosts in the game, who you basically help out to film his own movie. And honestly, I basically decided to let him finish up making his movie, because again, I can understand where he comes from. That being said, even with that, this is enough to basically give me the motivation to possibly find and get a hold of either Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon or the original Luigi's Mansion, so I can play through it myself to see if I get that same bit of excitement from those two games as I did with this. Here's hoping. Moving on next at number 4, we have Metroid Fusion. Oh boy. This freaking game. Yeah. Never would I have expected that this year would have been my first foray into the Metroidvania genre of this franchise. The Metroidvania genre as a whole. And the fact that Castlevania Aria of Sorrow was a previous entry on this entire countdown. And yeah, it kind of makes sense that Metroid Fusion would essentially be the other. And while this isn't my first Metroid game, that would be the first hunt demo of Metroid Prime Hunters for the DS. Another pattern, basically, of video games that was in franchises that I was introduced to on the DS. Anyway, that being said, I decided to take a look at Metroid Fusion, especially since the Metroid Prime franchise was getting a brand new entry this year with Metroid Prime 4, which is already out at this point alongside Pokemon Legends ZA, but that's neither here nor there. That being said, Metroid Fusion is a kind of an interesting game, and for what little I've played of the game, is kind of fun to say the least. Reason I haven't finished it yet? I am still stuck on the first boss. Honestly, I don't know what I'm doing wrong, but yeah, granted, with the Castlevania Aria of Sorrow one, that makes sense why I haven't finished it, because I've been swamped. But Metroid Fusion is just, it's basically pretty hard. Especially with that first boss killing me every time I try to face off against it. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I mean, I'm willing to learn, but yeah. It's gonna take a while to get back to that game. Really says a lot. Moving on next at number 3, we have Dragon Quest III 2D HD Remaster. This year is kind of funny, especially recently, since we just found out that Dragon Quest VII is getting a remaster. And especially, which again is one I was not expecting. But that being said, even with that, ever since the Dragon Quest hero ended up getting into Smash Brothers, this got me interested in wanting to play the Dragon Quest franchise for myself, and I didn't know where to start with. So I decided, why not start with Dragon Quest XI's? Only to get Dragon Quest III as a result of my interlibrary loan getting confused. Granted, that being said, that misunderstanding was basically the best thing to have ever happened to me. While I was expecting Dragon Quest XI's, I eventually got a perfect foothold into the world of Dragon Quest. And honestly, I am glad I started with 3, because this is one of the most exciting games I ever played through. And this is really saying a lot, considering the likes of 7 and 4 are out there in the ether as well. But even with that, I really enjoyed this game. And honestly, I want to try and find a way to play some more Dragon Quest titles as well. And again, Steam might be the way to do it, especially considering Dragon Quest XI's. Yeah, especially considering that. And not to just make fun of Rab. Yeah. Not just because of that. Moving on next at number 2, we have Legend of Zelda Minish Cap. Yeah. Surprisingly enough, with Legend, the one that, if you would have told me that the most that I would have played of a franchise that I would have played through this year was the Zelda franchise, I would have laughed at you and said that you were crazy. Well, color me a fool, because honestly, that's the case. As basically this year, I found myself playing through 3 Zelda titles. Those being the original Legend of Zelda Link to the Past for the SNES, Link's Awakening for the Game Boy, and the one that's the number 2 entry, Legend of Zelda The Minish Cap. And again, this wasn't my first rodeo into playing through Legend of Zelda The Minish Cap, as I basically previously played through the game on the Game Boy Advance emulator on my phone, and even with that, I first experienced it when it was being advertised in stores at like Target, either Target or Walmart, when they had the Game Boy Advance and GameCube kiosks. So I had a chance to experience it for the first time. And either way, I got a chance to fully further experience this game for what it is. And honestly, I enjoy every minute of it. From its whimsical character design to the comic timing of the characters, every bit of aspects really allowed me to enjoy the way Hyrule in an entirely new light than what I'm used to. That's like Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, sort of thing. And hopefully next year, I'll be able to enjoy a lot more of the Zelda franchise, at least to say the least. You can count on that. Finally, at number 1, we have Donkey Kong Country. Yeah. One of the most notable... Yeah, honestly, when it comes down to it, who else but Donkey Kong would kinda take the top spot? I mean, granted, one of the games I ended up playing through this year was in fact Donkey Kong Country Returns 3D, which I was stymied a bit because I didn't know how to duck and jump. And with his brand new game coming on the Nintendo Switch 2, which also gave us our first look at a younger Pauline, and thus changing up the entire Mario timeline for the wonky. Seriously, what in the world's going on? Honestly, the fact of the matter is, I basically have an interesting effort with Donkey Kong, especially since my first ever Donkey Kong game was a version of Donkey Kong Country for the Game Boy. But surprisingly enough, this was the first time I ever played through the original Donkey Kong Country for the SNES. And the fact that, if anything, if I had told anyone that I had not played that much of the Donkey Kong franchise, they would have told me either to play the original Donkey Kong Country for the SNES or Donkey Kong Country 2 Diddy's Kong Quest. And honestly, I am glad I decided to play through the original and see the beauty that is the entire franchise. And honestly, I don't think I'm ever going to look back. And in fact, the way Rare, considering how this showed Rare in its heyday, was basically courtesy of Rare in its heyday, and the fact that I am surprised we never got another score like the score created by David Wise. Honestly, we need to We need to get more games, more modern Donkey Kong games of similar magnitude of Donkey Kong Country. And I think Donkey Kong Bonanza is the first step. Keep on trucking, you big ape. Those are my top 10 video games I played in 2025. Like, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you next time.